Malsburg.
State of Florida versus George Zimmerman. Verdict: we the jury find George Zimmerman not guilty. So say we all four-person.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Steve Malsburg Show. That was Saturday night. The jury in Sanford, Florida, finding George Zimmerman not guilty. Not guilty of second-degree murder, not guilty of manslaughter, not guilty of either of those two. And the media assault has ensued against George Zimmerman. But more than the media assault, I want to talk to our next guest, Alan Dershowitz, about this. Hello, Alan. Thank you so much for joining us again today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. I was frantically trying to reach you this morning because as I woke up and I watched TV and I saw this headline news interview that CNN was previewing, which will run tonight, where the four prosecutors, the three who participated in the courtroom and Angela Corey were interviewed on headline news, and I was in a state of shock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I want you to hear what Angela Corey had to say and also what Bernie De La Rionda had to say in answer to this question from the host. Here's cut number 30. This is cut number 30.
One word to describe George Zimmerman.
Murderer.
George Zimmerman.
Lucky.
All right, Angela Corey said murderer. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Well, you know, Angela Corey is regarded as the most irresponsible and the worst prosecutor in Florida, and probably one of the worst prosecutors in the United States. She had this reputation well before this case, and that's why she was picked, because the governor of the state was determined to get a prosecution because there was so much pressure on him from groups around the state. So she picked Corey. Corey then submitted an affidavit which was, in my view, virtually perjurious to the court in order to get a second-degree murder prosecution. She, remember, is sworn to tell not only the truth, but the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And in the affidavit, she just simply omitted the fact that there was evidence that Zimmerman had bruises on his head, had bruises on his nose. She said that the father had identified the voice of his son on the tape without saying that he had first said, "I don't think that's my son." She simply suborned perjury, in my opinion, in submitting that affidavit. She overcharged. There was no case for second-degree murder here. She realized that, and that's why they sought a manslaughter prosecution and went so far as even to seek a child abuse charge and a felony murder charge. It was, in my 50 years of practicing law, I have never encountered a more irresponsible prosecutor. Then she fired one of her people who blew the whistle on her and told the truth about the evidence she was withholding.
Right, the IT gentleman who had turned over, who testified that he had texts and pictures from Trayvon Martin's cell phone, which they never told the defense about, and that guy was fired the day that the jury got the verdict.
Hey, she would have had me fired if she had the power to do that. She got on the phone after I criticized her early on when she submitted that, in my view, perjurious affidavit. She got on the phone and she called somebody at Harvard trying to reach the dean, and for a half an hour ranted and raved about me and how I should be fired. Of course, she was laughed at by the people who took the phone call. But she has a reputation for being a tyrant and not tolerating dissent within the office, doing it her way. And her way is illegal and unprofessional. And if there is a Justice Department investigation, it ought to focus on her conduct. After all, violations of civil rights are not committed when two people meet, both of whom are private citizens. That's not how civil rights are violated. Civil rights are violated by government officials, by police, by prosecutors, by others who have the power of government behind them. And so if the Justice Department does an investigation, it surely ought to include the misconduct committed by Angela Corey. She also, if there had been any violence, fortunately there hasn't been, mostly as the result of the really excellent behavior of the Martin family, but if there had been violence, she would be responsible for it because she raised the expectations. She got a second-degree murder charge. She basically told the judge that there was a case here for second-degree murder, and there was never a chance of getting a second-degree murder a verdict in this case.
No, I know that. I agree with you 100%, and you've been on her from the beginning, and you've made remarks about her from on this show as well. But if you can, I would like you to speak. You say if there had been blood, she would have some on her hands because she raised expectations. How about now, in an interview that's going to air tonight, still not saying we have to respect the jury's verdict, he's innocent under our law system. She calls him a murderer.
Right.
What's your reaction to that? How unusual is that?
It's utterly irresponsible. Clearly, he is somebody who was acquitted by a jury on the ground of self-defense, and she shouldn't be going around second-guessing the jury verdict and calling him a murderer. He probably has a defamation action against her. She has no immunity as a prosecutor for appearing on television, and if I were his lawyer, I would think seriously about bringing a defamation lawsuit against her for calling him a murderer.
Yeah, well, that's that. I'm glad to hear that because I was in a state of shock, and I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it's commonplace, but I just couldn't fathom.
No, it's not commonplace. Nothing she does is commonplace. Look, I've seen plenty of bad prosecutors, very good prosecutors. I've never encountered a prosecutor quite like her. And by the way, other prosecutors. I got an email recently from a former state attorney in Florida saying that she was an embarrassment to state attorneys, and that state attorneys all over Florida are appalled at her conduct in this case. I've gotten emails from judges, former judges, current judges, saying they've never seen misconduct of the kind that they've seen from this prosecutor and this prosecutorial team.
Yeah, and there will be sanctions. Just one more to reiterate: if in fact, God forbid, after tonight's TV show, the protests do turn more severe, would you say that she bears responsibility for that?
Well, I sure hope it doesn't turn severe.
Me too.
Remember, this is a woman who has still, as far as I know, still not yet spoken to the family of the Martins. Still never given them any solace. She hadn't, at least as of the last time she spoke on television. All she does is go on television and try to justify her conduct and try to attack Zimmerman, knowing that she has people out there who she's pandering to. She just hasn't done her job. And the idea that she hasn't sat down with the Martin family, if that's still true, I don't know if it's true, it was true until quite recently, it's just shocking. I mean, the first thing you would do as a prosecutor, the first thing you would do is seek a meeting with the Martin family and say how sorry you are that there wasn't a successful prosecution, that you didn't do your job well. By the way, I don't think any prosecutor could have secured a conviction in this case. You can't fill evidentiary gaps by rhetoric or by calling people names. The evidence in this case just didn't make out a case for murder, manslaughter, child abuse. It made out a case of self-defense. We still don't know who struck the first blow. We don't know who yelled, "Help me, help me." The evidence strongly suggests that Martin was on top and Zimmerman was on bottom and having his head banged against the pavement. If that doesn't raise a reasonable doubt about self-defense, I don't know what does.
Absolutely. One more, and you've explained, we don't have enough time to go into the whole thing, but I understand that the civil charges, if they're brought, there's a high bar, and it's usually brought against the police departments, as you said, very rarely, if ever, against a civilian. But having said that, given the fact that this is Eric Holder, and he's said again that an investigation is still ongoing, he hasn't poo-pooed it and said, no, we've gone there, done that, and we didn't see anything. So they're still looking into it. Do you think that he will bring one or will not bring one?
Well, I hope not. This is not an appropriate use of Justice Department authority. It's now been turned into a political football. The NAACP is objecting to the verdict. Where do they come off? Objecting to the verdict in a case. And they're joined by the Arab American Anti-Defamation League, who's partnering with them on this issue. You would think that these organizations really had more appropriate issues to focus on. This was just two people who got involved in an unfortunate situation. It's a tragedy. It's a traditional case of self-defense. It is not an appropriate subject either for the NAACP or for the American Arab Anti-Defamation League.
Alan, Jesse Jackson says Trayvon Martin is Emmett Till. So when that's the tone that the left and the so-called civil rights leaders are taking.
If you can't tell the difference between a lynching and an act of self-defense, then you're blinded.
All right.
If you can't tell, then, and you're also insulting